get started. I'm ready. All right. Well, welcome to the February meeting of the Delta Independent Science Board. I call this meeting to order and we'll go, I'll give an overview of the common process very quickly. We will take written questions and comments and just follow the instructions on your screen and on the meeting notice. We will now take the roll call of the members to establish quorum. So I'll go through everybody. Hello, Diane. Virginia,
Hi, I'm Virginia Dale. I have no new conflicts.
Tanya,
Tanya Heikela, no new declarations.
Diane,
Diane McKnight, no new declarations.
Anna,
Anna McCulloch, no new declarations.
Bob,
Bob Nyman, no new declarations.
Obi,
Jayant Abedsekara, no new declarations.
Kenny,
Kenny Rose, no new declarations.
and Lisa.
Lisa Wanger, no new declarations.
And I'm Inge Werner, and I have no new declarations. So next, I'll give an overview of the agenda today. We will, as usual, discuss ongoing reviews, and we will also discuss in more depth the contaminants monitoring prospectus. We will also get several reports from Julie Lee, the Executive Officer of the Delta Council, and from the Delta Lead Scientist, Lisamarie Windham-Myers. Are there any public comments at this point?
There are none.
Right, agenda item 2 is the chair's report and business matters. So I'll just give a brief overview of what happened during the last month. So since the last meeting, the Delta ISB finalized its review and comments on the draft Delta Adapts adaptation plan. A copy is part of your meeting package. Just a quick summary here. The document provides a solid foundation, but requires further development in some areas, is the main conclusion of the Delta Independent Science Board. For example, one criticism identified by the Delta ISB is the lack of clarity in the plan regarding the process of how strategies and implementation actions were selected, and a lack of prioritization. Several other examples are included in the comment document. I don't want to call it letter since it's somewhere on the order of 30 pages long. In addition, the single time frame used to set priorities for the Delta's future in the report may be too short. The addition of a longer term perspective would better capture the region's evolving dynamics. So that's a very quick summary of it. Thank you, Obi, for finalizing that together with staff. An announcement, this year's IEP workshop will be from March 4th to 6th. It will be hybrid with an online and in-person option at California Natural Resources Agency in Sacramento. I plan to attend, and Margot Metzen has submitted an abstract. She will basically present the review proposal for the contaminants monitoring review, and I'll be there to assist where needed. I'm sorry? I heard something, sorry. So in addition, staff are putting together a poster presentation to help promote the food web's review. And you can find the registration information as part of your meeting package. Next, I will give a brief overview of what's going on with our reviews and other activities. The subsidence review, review leads are still working to get a public review draft out. The DMDU, decision-making under deep uncertainty review. Review leads are still working with staff to prepare a journal article on the scenario inventory and analysis. Lisa, did you want to add anything about that?
Of the deep uncertainty analysis, is that what you just said?
Yeah, is there any update you wanted to provide?
Yes, so work is continuing apace. Shoko is making good progress on the publication we're hoping to get out about the scenario analysis. And we actually have a meeting coming up very soon to try to put some final touches on that, I hope. That's planning to be part of that special issue of the SFU's journal. And also there's other work going on to try to bring home other major points we want to get across about the DMDU. So we're thinking about another manuscript, and that's a little bit more in a nascent phase, but we've made some progress there too. So hopefully we'll be getting all that out soon.
All right, thank you. Thank you for that. And third, the monitoring enterprise review manuscript is still in the works, but also very close to finalization. And will be submitted fairly soon, I think, to a journal. Since the last meeting, we received some public correspondence, one letter from California Water Research on NOAA science on the chopping block, an action alert. That's it. Are there any public comments at this point?
There are none.
Right.
Inga, I just want to acknowledge the contributions from Kenny Rose in assembling the comments on the Delta Adapt review.
Oh, thank you, Kenny Rose.
Okay.
All right. Sorry, I missed that one. Next would be agenda item 3, the Delta Stewardship Council and Executive Officer Report, which Julie Lee will present. Julie, I'll hand over to you in that case.
Thanks, Inga. Thanks for having me here today. I'd like to start out by thanking the ISB for its comment letter on the Council's Tribal Environmental Justice Issue Paper and the Delta Adaptation Plan. We're working to address your comments on both of those items, and we hope to have the final Tribal Environmental Justice Issue Paper ready in the spring. So we will also provide an update on Delta Adapts and see how we are addressing your comments at a future meeting. I'd like to share an update related to the 2023 Delta Residents Survey, a research effort conducted by an external research team and funded by the Delta Stewardship Council. Over the last year, the research team developed a few outreach products that are now available online and are part of y'all's meeting package. In 2023, researchers surveyed over 2,000 people in California's Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta region to better understand their sense of place, quality of life, priorities, and concerns for the region, as well as their experiences and attitudes related to environmental and climate change impacts. Among some of the other findings, the results showed the survey respondents were both aware of and concerned about climate change. They support environmental protection measures and share a desire for more robust climate action from both government and fellow residents. We're also excited to note that the council contracted with Sacramento State to mail postcards to all the survey respondents in order to let respondents know that survey results are available and how to learn more. The survey results are informing the work of the DSC and other organizations working in the Delta, so we hope that you'll check out those materials to learn about that project. Next, I wanted to let you know that the DPIC Restoration Subcommittee is going to meet on March 13th in Sacramento at the CNRA building. And the agenda includes presentations on the Wetlands Regional Monitoring Program, accelerating restoration in the Sacramento Valley, and Delta Adapts. The subcommittee will also discuss efforts to plan another restoration forum. In addition, we're also planning a DPIC spring gathering, which is scheduled for April 3rd. The primary focus of the meeting will be Delta Meadows, a new state park currently in development near Walnut Grove. We'll hear from state park staff on the planning process, timeline, and recreational connectivity opportunities. And we plan to start the meeting at the new beautifully restored Clarksburg Schoolhouse before traveling to nearby Locke to tour the Delta Meadows site. And we're also going to be discussing Prop 4, the climate bond funds, and hear a brief update on current efforts to better integrate modeling to improve outcomes in the Delta. Finally, each year, the council develops a report to showcase the progress made towards California's co-equal goals for the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta. The 2024 annual report is now complete, and I'll turn it over to Brittany Young of the council staff to provide an overview on that.
Audio real quick.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Thank you so much, Edmund, for pulling up my slides. Thank you so much for that introduction, Chair Lee, and hello, Chair Warner and Delta ISB members. It is a pleasure to be here with you today on behalf of the Council's communications team. I'm here to present the Council's 2024 annual report, the theme of which is reflecting on growth and collaboration. The communications team and executive leadership felt that this theme best described the reflective nature of our work last year. Next slide, please. Before we look back at 2024, let's talk a little bit about what the Council aims to achieve through annual reports. Each year, the Council's communications team develops a report to showcase our agency's progress toward California's co-equal goals. Staff presents the annual reports at the first Council meeting of the year, centering the presentation around the report's theme, content, format, and distribution. In recent years, we've heard your appreciation of StoryMap's abilities to bring our reports to life. And with that feedback in mind, the Council's 2024 annual report is once again hosted in a StoryMap setting and includes lots of photos, graphics, and interactive features. Next slide, please. For those unfamiliar, a story map is a web-based application that allows authors to tell stories interactively and in the context of other multimedia content. For the optimal user experience, we recommend viewing the story map on a computer rather than a tablet or phone. The top of the report begins with a foreword by Chair Lee, emphasizing important achievements of the Council and its partners last year, including the California Natural Resources Agency, Department of Water Resources, Delta Protection Commission, and Delta Conservancy, to name a few. The foreword is followed by an introduction that describes how California relies on the Delta as a hub for water, biodiversity, agriculture, infrastructure, transportation, recreation, and more. And second, the ways in which our agency has grown. Next, visitors will reach a leadership spotlight. So next slide, please. In 2024, the Council, the Delta Science Program, and the Delta Independent Science Board welcomed new leadership and expressed heartfelt thanks for the knowledge and relationships established by those who have moved on. We welcome Chair Lee as Council Chair, Gail Miller as Vice Chair, Dr. Lisamarie Windham-Myers as Delta Lead Scientist, Dr. Inga Warner as Delta ISB Chair, and Dr. Diane McKnight as Delta ISB Chair-elect. Next slide, please. Speaking of leaders, visitors will arrive next at an audio quote from our Executive Officer, Jessica R. Pearson, acknowledging the addition of a new unit focused on climate and environmental justice issues in the Delta, and the hiring of our first ever Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Officer. She notes the intention of these actions and describes their subject matters as intrinsic to the Council's role and mission. Next slide, please. From there, the story map describes the Delta plan as a common vision for taking on the Delta's challenges. The report reflects on the second 5-year review of the Delta plan, and it covers the public review drafts published last year, including our tribal and environmental justice issue paper and climate adaptation plan as important chapters in our 2024 story. Next slide, please. The story map transitions into the report's science section, which begins by recognizing science communication as an essential function of our Delta Science program. It celebrates events like the first in-person Bay Delta Science Conference since 2018, the Salinity Management Workshop, the Science for Communities Workshop, and their impact on the Delta as a whole. It promotes reports published last year to explore science's grand challenges and harmful algal bloom monitoring. Next slide, please. There we go. Oh, back one more, please. You guys are getting a sneak peek. Perfect. Thank you so much. The report also describes how our science program supported the best available science last year. Examples include facilitating peer reviews at the request of state and federal agencies like the Department of Water Resources and the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, and working with the Delta Independent Science Board, and of course, funding research and fellowships. Next slide, please. Speaking of research, the report includes swipeable findings released in 2024 from research the Council funded to support decision-making related to improving early detection of and rapid response to aquatic invasive vegetation, assessing sea level rise and flooding changes in the Delta using historical water level records, and mapping the Delta's adaptation governance network. Next slide, please. The science section wraps up celebrating the Delta ISB's 7 products completed last year, including letter reviews of documents for agencies such as the Department of Water Resources and State Water Resources Control Board. The report also highlights how your thematic review on food webs provides information to help organizations assess how to better incorporate and advance food web knowledge to manage the Delta's ecosystems and identify what tools are available or should be developed. It notes that in response to this review, the Interagency Ecological Program Synthesis Team proposed a food web modeling project to assess the effectiveness of tidal wetland restoration and other resource management actions. Next slide, please. The story concludes with remarks dedicated to closing the book on 2024 and turning the page to 2025, a year the Council anticipates reaching several milestones. Next slide, please. Our annual reports webpage includes a link to the 2024 story map, along with our annual reports from 2019 through 2023. Last month, the communications and executive teams at the Council started to distribute the report broadly through our website, email announcement, social media platforms, and also through one-on-one connections with our colleagues, external partners, newsletter editorial teams, friends, and family members. We've also promoted the report among audiences involved with the legislature and hiring and recruitment. One last note here to share is that we have been monitoring earned engagement, and so far it's already seen more than 700 views, so we're really happy to share that news. Next slide, please. On behalf of the communications team, we hope that you enjoy exploring the 2024 annual report. That includes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you so much, Brittany, for that overview. I peeked into the document and it's really quite impressive. And also the online thing. Are there any questions for Brittany from the board? Or other comments?
So I
Diana.
just like
Diane.
to comment that I really like the story map approach, and we have used that in our work here in Colorado to reach out to the public about some of our findings after the Marshall Fire, this major fire that had such an impact in the community. So I just wanted to let you know, I think the story map is very effective. Good luck.
Thank you.
Don't see any other raised hands. So we'll let you off, Brittany. But
Thank you
thanks
very
very
much.
much for the nice presentation, and thank you, Julie, for the report. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Inga.
So, are there any public comments at this point?
There are none.
None. We're
But
zooming right along.
yeah, but Inga, we're a little ahead of schedule, so Lisamarie isn't on. She had like another meeting conflict at 9:30. I'm wondering if we want to switch up the climate symposium before the Delta lead scientist report.
Yeah, of course. We can do that. So let's move on to agenda item 5 in that case, planning for the Climate Science Research Symposium. So I'll give a little bit of a background there for those who haven't heard it yet. The Delta ISB plans to organize and host a public symposium in May 2025 on the current state of climate science in the Delta or in the region. I think, right? A subsequent symposium will focus on understanding how organizations in the region are considering climate change. The prospectus for this symposium has been finalized, and I will let turn over to Obi for a status update on the workshop planning at this point. Obi, you have the word.
Yeah, thank you, Inga. We've done several meetings already, tried to get some input from some of the agencies and others who are involved in climate work with reference to Delta region. We met with DWR, Delta Stewardship Council, and what's the last one? I forgot. I forget the last group that we met with. So with these discussions, we made some notes, and staff helped us a lot with assembling this information. The whole idea is like we wanted to make sure that we don't duplicate the effort through Science Symposium, basically get the best available science, but we also, so in that way, we wanted to know what how the agencies have used the climate information, particularly the science information, before we assemble the program for the climate symposium. So I'm going to ask Margot to give a summary of all our discussions. And I want to acknowledge the staff, Edmund, Margot, and Lauren for facilitating and participating in these discussions. Anna and I met most of the time in these meetings. Go ahead, Margot.
Thank you. So here is just a quick overview of what we have talked about so far. So as Obi mentioned, we talked with 3 different key agencies working in the Delta, specifically the Delta Stewardship Council, the Department of Water Resources, and the Governor's Office of Land Use and Climate Innovation. And we've also been working to create an AI-generated briefing document that synthesizes a lot of academic articles and reports around climate change in the Delta, as to create some preliminary information for participants. So I'll quickly go over who we talked to at each of these organizations and what some of the main takeaways from these conversations were. With the Delta Stewardship Council, we talked with the Delta Adapts team, so Morgan Chow, Christopher Kwan, Daniel Constable, Aaron Mullen, and James Edwards. And they had, as you all know, just released the Delta Adaptation Draft Plan, along with the Climate Vulnerability Assessment a couple years prior. And so the main climate drivers of concern that they wanted to talk about were atmospheric rivers and flooding, a lot of how that could affect levees and erosion in the Delta and potentially causing flooding. Also understanding how heavy precipitation throughout the entire watershed can increase flows and impact storage reservoirs that can impact the Delta, along with how drought and low precipitation can impact water quality, salinity, and X2 and also the idea of subsidence in any greenhouse gas emissions brought up and associated with agriculture might be playing into this. This group discussed some major uncertainties, a lot around how upstream management decisions can affect what's happening in the Delta and how this might change under different future political landscapes, along with predictions in a post-2050 world. So what does that mean for temperature, precipitation, any tipping points? They were interested in the impacts of compounding events and kind of more governance and management changes, such as failure to take appropriate or accelerated actions, along with uncertainty around shifts in precipitation, so maybe more falling as rain or snow, and how different changes in water use or demand in future conditions. So they identified a few ways that the symposium could help their work, specifically in the discussion of compounding drivers, a thorough analysis of drought, and they mentioned the need for an updated hydrological model of the Delta. We also spoke to DWR with Michael Anderson, the state climatologist, Lise Conrad, Andrew Schwartz, and Lindsay Correa. And this conversation touched on topics such as limitations of global climate models and sort of different approaches that the group is using in order to generate weather predictions for more localized and interannual changes. They were also commenting on some of the main drivers of concern or interest are similarly temperature, sea level rise, and the impact of extreme events. Some uncertainties that they mentioned that could be interesting to discuss were this sort of whiplash effect of what happens to a system when it goes kind of oscillating between really extreme, so extreme drought to extreme heavy rainfall, how different climate conditions could affect things like harmful algal blooms, invasive species, and changes in weather regimes. So if we're able to assume that patterns of climate drivers that we've seen in the past will kind of remain true under new conditions, and also similarly tipping points. So when do problems become unmanageable? DWR mentions that some benefits or ways that the symposium could help would be identifying current gaps in understandings around climate and how climate is changing in the Delta, and how current infrastructure is prepared to kind of deal with some of these shifts. And the last group we spoke to is the Governor's Office of Land Use and Innovation, Climate Innovation. They were recently renamed, formerly known as the Office of Planning and Research. And there we got to talk to people representing the 5th Climate Change Assessment, California's 5th Climate Change Assessment, and also the Vulnerable Communities platform that their climate services team is working on. So the 5th climate assessment should be released in mid-2026. So a lot of those reports are still in creation, but they will have 9 regional reports, 3 of which will geographically intersect with the Delta. And they will also have 4 different topical reports on racial equity and climate justice, climate-induced human displacement and migration, climate impacts to the economy, and tribal and indigenous communities. That could have some overlap with the symposium, specifically like the second day or second part. They're also working on their vulnerability or vulnerable communities platform, which is this sort of statewide analysis to show which climate hazards communities are vulnerable to and empower communities to identify these hazards and make decisions. They spoke also sort of wanted to highlight a similar theme of increased or improved hydrological information to predict flooding in the Delta would be really useful for them and is an uncertainty. They're really interested in sea level rise and the implications for flooding, and also see uncertainties around unknown kind of future social and political landscapes that could influence conditions. And they identified a couple ways for potential collaborations. They're already working with the Delta Stewardship Council to kind of try to create some reports and documents specifically about the Delta. They have a list of 26 different climate research priorities that are going to be included or considered in the new assessment. And they offered that they can help recommend topical speakers as they have a really wide network of collaborators and contributing authors. Additionally, since the release date for the fifth climate assessment is in mid-2026, if we still go ahead and have the symposium in May of this year, they said it could be a good time to kind of help influence or support some of their reports as it'll be in like a draft stage. We also, just a quick update on the AI briefing paper. This goal was to provide kind of a summary or overview of current research on climate science as it relates to the Delta. So we were using Google's notebook LM in order to create a summary of documents. We can include up to 50 documents. So 26 were peer-reviewed research articles and 24 were state agency reports. A lot of these articles and reports came from suggestions from our public commenters on the prospectus. So we're still working on that. So far, we found that it's kind of creating pretty broad generalized statements. So we're kind of tweaking some of the settings there to try to get a more specific and specialized summary of what sort of information we'd like to share with participants beforehand. And now we're just working on potentially creating a draft agenda, identifying speakers, and brainstorming the briefing document. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Obey.
Thank you, Margot. This is a very useful summary. I want to thank all the three groups, that who participated in our discussions and conversations. We learned a lot of new things, in my opinion, because we had references for reports from the governor's office group and some other information I was not aware of. So one thing I noticed is that I think there have been a lot of work done, but there is, I didn't get the impression there was good coordination among these efforts, although many of them use the same fundamental climate vulnerability assessment, I think dated 2021, that was used for Delta Adapt, which is quite a good exercise to understand the impacts. So I think, but our goal of this symposium is to learn about the latest, the best available science on climate information, particularly under future conditions. And I think that's some of the things that we need to focus on. What are the future conditions that would be relevant to, planning in Bay Delta region? So I think one of the things that we decided, we suggested was the AI tool. It might take a while for us to get it fine-tuned, to get all the information we need. So the suggestion was that we'll go ahead and have the symposium in May. And in March, at least, we will provide a copy of the AI document to ISB for your review. And then in getting ready for May. And we have some idea of how we should organize the workshop in May. And we're going to talk more about it. I don't know if I missed anything, Anna or Edmund or Lauren. Anna, do you want to add something?
Covered it. I think it was the two of the three meetings that I was able to attend. It was really interesting to hear about how intertwined, I mean, I guess it's not surprising, but how intertwined the physical climate science aspects are with the management aspects. And I think that'll be a challenge for us in terms of separating those two into those two separate days that we're planning for the workshop. But overall, I thought the meetings were very helpful, and I think we have a better sense of how to make sure that the workshops are useful to them as well as being useful to us in terms of educating ourselves.
Right. Well, one observation I had, was, maybe under future conditions, there's a lot of capacity constraints of the current system. For example, I used the example of the upstream reservoirs. They may not have enough capacity to handle excess runoff due to changing rainfall, snow ratios, or even the effect of wildfires on runoff characteristics. So I think including the entire system as a whole and looking at the capacity of the existing system and possibly as a tipping point might be something we need to think about. And also I think this idea that the management of the system is linked to what can and cannot be done. I think we need to kind of think about that. How do we separate that fundamental physical science from the how to respond to those as well? Perhaps we need to separate that into the second symposium. And one last thing, we learned about this weather generator that I had not heard much about. And I think that is a tool that could be used to incorporate future conditions in coming up with plausible climate drivers into the future. So that's kind of what we learned from these discussions. I think that's all we have. Anybody else? No.
Sounds exciting. Any questions or comments from the board?
Bob has.
Bob?
Hi, I guess I have a comment and a couple questions for Obe and Anna. I guess the first comment is I'm really curious to see what you come up with this AI generated summary of the existing literature, and if you had any thoughts on when that might be available, to take a look at. I certainly would be very interested in reading it and, and see if it's not, I know it's not going to be perfect, but it's something kind of looking towards the future as a strategy or a method for being able to summarize a lot of information in a hurry, at least get into the literature. So I'll just throw that out there. I'm very curious about this, and I'd like to see it sooner than later, if not probably informally rather than a formal, look at it. But I do have a couple of questions. So one is I was wondering, in your discussions with various groups, did you include kind of the engaged NGOs in California in your discussions, and also the federal agencies? It seems as though they would have a real interest in this particular activity. And, if you haven't done so, I guess I would encourage you to do so. I think they could provide a very different perspective than maybe, from the groups that you've already looked at. So, I was wondering if you had done that or you're planning to do it in the near future. So that's my first question.
Well, let me address your comment first. I think that notebook LM, actually Anna is the one who recommended that, which is very effective in summarizing a whole bunch of reports without going into reading them individually in very detail. One concern that we had was it provides a nice summary. Unless we do a little bit more work on it, we might get a very generalized high level observations, which might be very useful. So, I mean, our plan is to provide that or finalize that by March, at least for the ISB can review that document before the symposium. The other comment regarding whether we talk to federal agencies or not, we haven't done that, and something, I don't know if others agree, something we might want to pursue that and see what the Bureau is doing or has done in this region, what science are they using, or U.S. Army Corps of Engineers or other federal agencies, particularly in the primary climate science arena. But we might include some of them in our symposium as well. So anyway, I don't know if Anna or anybody else has some comments on Bob's question.
Yeah, I wanted to comment also on the notebook LMs. I don't know, and I feel like I've asked this question before, but I don't remember the answer, Lauren and Edmund. You know, I think I have a more optimistic view of Notebook LM maybe than Obey does. It's really very effective in my opinion. And so for people who aren't familiar, it's essentially an interface where you can upload either PDFs of documents or links to web-based resources or really any information in any format. And then you can ask it to summarize, but you can also query it with questions. And as opposed to, you know, general queries to sort of the online sort of AI tools that you're familiar with, when it answers, it has references to the documents that you uploaded. So you can click and view exactly where that information came from. And you can essentially interact with it by tapping any questions you would want, including, you know, very detailed scientific information. And so, and even in writing the summary, you can request that it write the summary at, you know, a middle school level or a PhD scientist level. And it's very, very effective. And so what I'm actually wondering, and I don't know what the rules are, is there's a way to share access to the Notebook LM, and at least for us internally, if that were possible, then rather than just receiving a 2-page summary, which you can receive as well, and I know that Marco is working on getting all the documents aligned to make that possible, you could also just literally log into that Notebook LM and ask it whatever questions you want. And so you could ask, you know, based on these documents, what is the state of the science in terms of atmospheric rivers? What is the state of the science in terms of upstream reservoir management in response to changes to hydrologic conditions resulting from climate change or whatever it may be? And it will glean from all those documents that are within the notebook the answers to those questions. And so I have only been using this tool for maybe the last 2 months, but in those 2 months, it's incredible how much time it can save in terms of learning about a topic. And to me, what's important is in a way where you can actually, again, click on the references and see exactly where it's coming from within the documents that you trust because and that you have chosen to upload within the system. So anyways, I guess I just want to offer that more maybe optimistic perspective of what can do, but also the question for Lauren and Edmund is whether we can actually share the Notebook LM itself with the ISB more broadly, or if that is not an option.
Yeah, I think that is an option. So I think the difference between this AI briefing paper is not necessarily like a static piece of paper, like a static report. It's like an interactive tool. So I believe the function, we could probably set it like everyone who has access can access to it, so we don't have to do like individual responses. So I think maybe that would be something that we could send out to the board to access that way.
Yeah, I think it would just require adding the Delta ISB emails of the members as collaborators in the notebook, and then they could log into it.
Yeah, and that's something we can follow up on after the meeting.
That would be great. Are you done, Anna?
No.
Yes, thank you.
Bob has a second question, right, Bob?
Yeah. Well, I just want to say to Anna first, I do have a second question, but I want to say to Anna first that I think this is potentially such a great tool. It's early in the game, but it's such a potentially could be such a great tool for groups like the ISB that we really should be taking advantage of it whenever we can, you know, and just be cognizant of it's probably going to have some glitches, but those are going to be ironed out as time goes by. And anyway, I'm looking forward to, you know, seeing what it generates for us here, you know, on the climate symposium or climate meetings. My second question is probably a little bit off the mark, but as an ecologist, I think it's important. And that is in your discussions with various groups, have ocean conditions come up as an important aspect of the changing climate for the Delta? And the reason I say this, you know, in the Eastern Pacific, especially along the coast, say within the 200-mile limit, there's actually a lot of interaction between the Delta and what goes on in the coastal zone. And And a lot of the effects of things we see ecologically in the Delta are, or potentially can be driven by ocean conditions. And I was wondering if this came up in any of your discussions with the various groups, that someone would be interested in exploring this a little further.
Yeah, Bob, I'll chime in first. The way I look at it, like, we have these primary physical drivers, and we look at things like extreme rainfall due to atmospheric rivers that would lead to flooding, or warming or heat in the region, or sea level rise and subsidence as some primary drivers. But then there are secondary drivers that may be influenced through teleconnections, like I think the ocean condition would be probably a teleconnection that would impact the conditions in the Delta region itself. We did talk a little bit about the teleconnections, but we didn't get into the ocean condition. That is something, if it is important, we can make sure that one of the speakers could cover that aspect. But I think, we realize that everybody said this is very complex. Interacting factors are numerous, and it's almost like a tree, with many branches. So we are trying to find a way to organize these factors into some logical sequence, so we don't get to every aspect. In particular, we don't want to talk a lot about impacts and how they are handled in the first symposium, maybe in the second symposium. So we have to be very very smart in organizing this in a way that we get the maximum out of the first symposium and not get into everything. But I think what you're discussing is an important topic that might be relevant to this teleconnection idea that I mentioned. I open others to chime in.
Well, I understand, and that probably is a topic that's off the mark for especially the initial meeting. So anyway, I was just curious if it came up in any of the discussions that you've had to date. So anyway, I'll stop there and give others a chance with their questions. So
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Lisa, you've been waiting for a while.
It's okay. A quick comment about Notebook LM and then a question. I've been playing around with it. I asked Anna to send me the link to it, and I've noticed the same sort of lack of nuance in some of its answers, but I was going to make the exact same suggestion that Anna did, that if we query specific questions as opposed to just taking the summary it does, I think you can get more better answers. So I think instead of trying to take that summary and make it better, maybe just ask a few key questions. So, and I think it's a really valuable tool. I've been using it a lot. Okay, next question is, there's this Bay Area, hang on, let me get the name right. Bay Area Climate Adaptation Network. David Bihar is the co-chair, and he ran a series of webinars about climate change and uncertainty that I caught some of. And I just wondered, did that come up at all? Because that webinar series seemed to bring up things that were happening at the California state level in terms of preparing for climate change and creating scenarios. And I just wondered if anyone brought that up.
Lisa, nobody brought that particular network name, but I talked to David Bihar. He and I are part of a NASA stakeholder advisory committee. And I did mention to him, we are doing this. And he said, I have a lot to say, keep me informed. So we might invite him, at least to be a participant if nothing else. And I'm somewhat familiar with his webinar series. I'm hoping we would cover all the things he may have talked about, but we might be in touch with him. Particularly, he's all over the place. He's in everything. So I will try to be in touch with him and see if he has any particular input that might be useful for us.
Yeah, I'm just really curious whether this stuff that's being done for the state is getting picked up at all at the regional level.
All right, Virginia. Oh, we can't hear you.
I know I have to move my mouse to the other screen. Sorry. So is this being part of the May 14, 15 regular meeting that we've planned? Yes? Okay,
That's the plan, I
okay.
think.
I just hadn't heard that, so I'd like to know that. But this is such a complex system, and figuring out the interfaces is really important. So and you know, I'm a big fan of conceptual models. So I would like to suggest that we start with a whiteboard that has a draft conceptual model of some of these pieces of how they fit together, and have different colored pens available. And the people at the workshop do their best to modify this so we can come out with a diagram that shows potential interactions. It'll be a big mess, but I need to see that to understand these interfaces, and it would be really helpful. You know, we could use different colors for different forces, sea level rise, precipitation, or fires, or whatever. But to me, that is going to be a really helpful outcome if we could pull that off.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's exactly one of the thoughts I had after the three discussions with the three groups. This is such a complex, we need to draw either conceptual diagram or some kind of, box and arrow diagram showing all these factors and highlighting the ones that we want to concentrate in the first symposium and not get into everything, which will not be very beneficial in my opinion. But so that's something we might try to come up with. We'll work if the staff doesn't mind. We might try to put something together as at least a straw conceptual diagram of what we heard.
All right. All right, Tanya has her hand raised.
Yeah, first of all, I just want to say thanks to Margot for a great presentation and summarizing that information from the discussions that you've had. They really highlight just, again, the complexity of the topic that we're grappling with here. And I wonder, I guess this is maybe more of a process question. I'm wondering if the agenda for the first symposium and the second symposium will need to be kind of updated. I know we have those initial questions that were in the prospectus of, we're going to focus on these 5 things, I guess, for symposium 1. Do you think, based on these conversations, based on the public comments we've gotten, and maybe additional conversations that could be had, that there'll need to be some iteration on the agenda? And how are we kind of thinking about making sure that we're matching the agenda to the needs that we're hearing out there from the potential participants?
I think the high questions are still valid. Again, I would defer to Lauren and Edmund on process, but when we had these conversations, we offered to keep them posted as the agenda evolves, to make sure that the way that it's built is responsive to needs that they feel that they have. So certainly, I think having it be an iterative process makes sense, but I don't see, the questions that we had were broad enough that I think they easily cover the topics that came up during the conversations that we had. Obi, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, Tanya, yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, like Anna said, we'll keep the same question. What we did, at least we took the initial steps, working with staff to reorganize them. Like, let's move this question up so it is part of the first symposium, and change the order so there's a logical break between the first symposium and the second symposium. For example, one of the topics we might want to cover in the first symposium is, what is the role of compounding effects of these drivers? What's the science there? So I think we are already thinking along those lines of changing or developing a agenda for the first symposium based on what we heard. But the fundamental questions will remain the same. We might just change the order of them, and then I think they were already separated, but we're trying to fine tune them.
No, that sounds good. It just, wanted to make sure I was clear on what that process looked like. And of course, if you need input from the rest of the board, we're all here to provide support.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for that discussion. And yes, the first part or the first symposium is planned to be part of our sorry, May meeting, in-person meeting. Now I have a question to ask. We're so theoretically we should have a break now, but
I think Inga, there's a question from public, I think.
oh, hang on. Are there
I don't know.
public comments, Edmund?
Yes, there are public comments. We have one from
Thank you.
Deirdre Jardin. Deirdre, you should have the ability to unmute your microphone. Thank you.
Thanks. I was looking at trends in nonlinear trends in temperature and precipitation, and I proposed to the IEP that there's definitely some kind of it's like phase shifts associated with changes in the state of the Pacific Ocean. And there's actually a change point around 2013 in temperature. There was a big step increase.
Are you still there, Deirdre? That it?
Oh, sorry, I didn't unmute myself. My research background is in complex systems theory, and I spent a lot of time looking at the climate data, and I came and there's actually a change point in temperature around 2013. There was a big step increase in temperature associated with coming out of the hiatus, and there's a step decrease in temperature, in precipitation around the same time that may be associated with a change in the state of the Pacific Ocean. There was an emergence of a warm blob around that time in the North Pacific. I haven't traced it to the California current, but I've talked some. And I proposed to the IEP that they look at, we know some of there are shifts, there's the Pacific Decadal Oscillation, and you can look at the way precipitation changes, but I proposed that it would be good partly to look at these, they're sort of natural climate epochs. And I got into looking at things across climate epochs because in specific climate epochs, because for example, 1977 to 98 was overall a pluvial period and was wetter than average. And then following 97, 98 El Nino, it switched to a drier period. And we're now starting to understand that some of this may be partly forced. That's some emerging climate research, but understanding it may be helpful to not look at things average completely across climate epochs because, for example, Rosie Hart found that one of the things that was keeping the Delta ecosystem was recovering was the increased frequency of droughts, which may be a characteristic of this kind of climate epoch we're in right now, and we can switch to and it may shift to a wetter epoch later, but there's very distinct shifts. So anyway, I could get you some of the analysis I've been doing, but I spent a year looking at it very intensely and reviewing an enormous amount of the research literature.
Thanks very much, Deirdre.
Inga, I have can I comment on that?
Of course, yes.
Yeah,
yes.
Deirdre, thank you. Obviously the change point or phase shift, I'm hoping would be part of the discussion when we, in the symposium itself, let's say we invite somebody on, for example, sea level rise or any other atmospheric rivers or any other topic. I'm hoping they will not only look at the continuous change, but also potential step change. I have seen a similar step change in the East Coast, Southeast Coast, Interestingly enough, around 2012, the question is, are these episodic or are these persistent changes? I'm hoping the speakers that we invite will shed light on future conditions. Or, maybe this might be a question of deep uncertainty at some point, but at least have a discussion on the potential for phase shifts is something I'm hoping we can have at the symposium.
I did want to say, so I've been beating a path. So I talked to Dan Kyan at Scripps, and I've talked with the state climatologist, and I've talked with researchers at NOAA, and I keep finding that I'm informing them about the research literature. So it's not something that's in there. I was urged to publish it because I offered it for the climate update. And I think it's definitely more interest because of the step change in temperature we saw globally in 24, 25. We didn't see that on, 23, 24. And we didn't see that so much on the West Coast. But I'd be happy to, I've got Python code, and I'd be happy to look at it in your region too, and share. It's just, I needed to get it published.
Right. Thank you, Deidre. I think we have to move on, and I'm hoping for some discussion on this at the symposium itself. Yeah, it sounds very interesting. So I have to hear from Lisamarie what her time planning is, since she is next on the agenda. Actually, a break is next on the agenda. Lisamarie, do you have time so that we can take a 20-minute break now?
Absolutely.
Is that
Yeah,
okay?
absolutely. I'm ready. Yeah, thanks.
Okay. Well, in that case, if there are no other public comments, Edmund, are there any others?
There are none.
Okay.
Wait, I just want to confirm what Lisamarie just said, because I feel like there might have been a miscommunication. Lisa, would you prefer to go now, or can you wait 20 minutes?
Thank you, Lisa. I am ready now, and I'm going to be on the call for the rest of the day. So anytime that fits in the schedule. Thanks.
Okay, it was an ambiguous answer. I want to make sure we didn't roll over your schedule.
Thanks.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Lisa. Okay, then I suggest we take a 20-minute break now. And continue at 10:25. So, okay, welcome back to the February meeting of the Delta Independent Science Board. For those who weren't here before the break, we have switched agenda items 4 and 5. So we are now getting to agenda item 4, which is the report of the Delta lead scientist. Welcome, Lisamarie, and I'll hand over the word to you right away. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Chair Werner, and thank you, Board, for inviting me to give an update of what's been going on within the Delta Science program. I'm going to have Edmund and staff do the slides for me, so I think we can go ahead and move to the next slide. It's been a busy quarter. And I'm going to highlight here again, we have lots of core functions. I am going to focus on 4 main ones today. I'm not going to talk about prioritizing research with some of the Science Action Agenda advances in terms of research investment analysis that we're doing. I'm not going to talk about the research funding, which we will be announcing in March. Both of those, the SAA and the research announcements, will be coming at the March Council meeting. And that includes the Delta Science Fellowships, the incoming cohort of fellows will also be announced at the March meeting. And then also, I will not be talking about some of our independent review through the independent peer review unit, because we'll be focusing on those kicking into gear. There's 2 big ones coming up with Bureau of Reclamation and with Department of Water Resources in April. And then, of course, there's the ongoing National Academies of Science right now review on the long-term operations of the Central Valley Project. I'm not going to focus on those. I'm going to focus on the collaborative work we're doing through the development of the next edition of the Delta Science Plan, some of the synthesis work that we're doing, coming out soon, coming out like within a week. Some of the social science advances of the adaptive management unit, and then finally end with some changes coming to the Delta Independent Science Board. So next slide, please, Edmund. Okay, so again, winter is a busy time. Our focus has been primarily on workshops, publications, and recruitment of new positions. Everybody's also busy with contracts and budgets, but again, I'm going to share those at the next council meeting, and then obviously at the next quarterly update with the Independent Science Board. So today, let's just focus instead on recent events. One last week, one coming up next week, an upcoming event, and then one in May. The State of Bay Delta Science is starting to come out right now. Next week, we'll have our first issue, talk about that. The Social Scientist Extension Specialist hire is ongoing. We can talk a little about that. And other social science outreach products that we that are available online right now, and we encourage you to use. And then the last topical item will be the from the DSP specifically will be the interweaving traditional knowledge component, new publication led by Shoka Shinbrot, and then also the interweaving roundtable that we've started as of last week. And then the final thing, again, is to talk about the Delta Independent Science Board recruitment, which has gone live, and we'll have a busy summer of recruiting the next 3 new members. It'll be sad to see some of our most valued people go. All right, next slide, please. Thank you. All right, so let's just focus on last week. It was a really busy week. It's something that we've been waiting for a long time. There was a 2-day workshop. First day was a full 8-hour day in person at the California Natural Resources Agency building. The support that we had, I have to call out, from the communications team was seamless. And we have great photos from Carly Guadagnolo, and the audience participation online and in the room was wonderful. And it's something I also want to do to call out the role of Tricia Lee, our very own Delta Science Program Senior Environmental Scientist. And she just did a tremendous job on leadership and organization of this important event. The Delta Science Plan is a 5-year roadmap for the Delta Science community to be developed through an open, transparent, and inclusive process. And Tricia was able to make that actually happen. The science plan shares visions, principles, and approaches to better coordinate science and more effectively communicate the outcomes of science activities. And it's not just the Delta Science Program product for the Delta Science Program, but it's informed by and for the Delta Science community. And it's focused on improving how we are doing science in the system. It's different than the Science Action Agenda, which is more about prioritizing management needs and science gaps. This is more of a roadmap. And the Independent Science Board reviewed our current Delta Science Plan, the 2019 edition, and asked for the 5-year update to be more bold, flexible, and strategic. And so that's what was done this time. As you know, you've heard about the grand challenges as a framework for organization. We talked through that at this meeting, talked through that organizational change and about how the current Delta Science Plan is used or could be better used so that this next iteration is even more effective and inclusive across the Delta Science enterprise, all of it. And so we're working on that update right now. Thanks for the slide change. And I'm going to just highlight some of the talks that happened and some of the conversations in the room. This will be live on YouTube at some point, and I'm not sure when. I haven't gotten the date for when it's going to get posted, but the entire meeting was recorded, the talks, and the room discussion, so that will be available. Sam Luoma was the first speaker, and again, past Delta lead scientist, in fact, the first during the CalFed days. And he focused on what we can do to accelerate our path towards addressing the grand challenges that face our system. And he gave a sense of context so we can acknowledge the challenges, but also the successes. He thought it very important to acknowledge the successes of the past 25 years that make it even possible to be at this point today. And so he highlighted that our science is appreciated right now in the system as a fundamental part of decision-making in this naturally conflicted and complex system. He gave examples of where we may not want to start over or disrupt things too much, because we will then start at ground zero, and we've done so much building of this community through time, and we can really build off of those successes. He gave lots of good examples of past challenges, past problems, and ways that they were overcome. And he ultimately, in the end, focused on trust and cooperation just being absolutely necessary for us to move forward. And so anything that builds that capacity is going to really help us move forward. The next session was a panel discussion led by Dr. Shoko Shinbrot, and it opened a wider discussion of opportunities to address incorporating other ways of knowing into the science enterprise. There was a panel of Dr. Nina Fontana from UC Davis's Native American Studies Department and Zach Gigoni from the Shingle Springs Band of Miwok Indians. He's specifically an environmental scientist with the program. And they used so many good figures and stories graphically to illustrate, illuminate, and make possible a much wider discussion about how communications and outreach can be improved, and how we can grow the science enterprise towards more useful and relevant information as we see new challenges emerging. Then we took a break, and the Delta Stewardship Council Chair Julie Lee brought us back from lunch with some welcoming words, and then also highlighting the council's desire and need that decision makers have to hear new ways of addressing our grand challenges. And the focus of this workshop, again, was on addressing the challenges, not just enumerating the challenges. We then heard from Dr. Mark Lubell from UC Davis's Department of Environmental Science and Policy about how Grand Challenge 3, the way our information exchange is limited by the current community structure, both within and between organizations. He emphasized how research here in the Delta and then elsewhere could help point us towards better learning opportunities that can accelerate understanding. We had breakout discussions for the rest of the day, and being here in person was especially inspiring to me because of the broad and open-ended discussions and big picture thinking that was happening in the room, and still grounded by scientists that are in the weeds. And so Mark Lubell made a really good point that we still need people down in the weeds for learning to happen. We can't all operate at this more general and higher level plane. We need to have some real data to talk about and understanding of those limitations. We also had an opportunity for the audience to participate in the storytelling and breakout discussions on their approaches for addressing the grand challenges. And it was really fruitful and interesting conversations in the room. Next slide, please. Thank you. And day 2 was all online, but it was very engaging. It started with a talk by Dr. Laurel Larson, the former Delta lead scientist and associate professor in the UC Berkeley Departments of Geography and Civil Environmental Engineering. She addressed Grand Challenge 1 and suggested we can address it by anticipating and adapting science to future management needs. She used a lot of examples, and she shared tools and concepts of adaptation tipping points, like changes in water rights or managed retreat or fallowing fields, things that are perhaps undesirable, but they're necessary futures that scientists need to consider to be prepared for a changing world. To address Grand Challenge 2, environmental changes outpacing science, Dr. Lisa Wenger, the past chair of the Delta Independent Science Board and research professor at University of Maryland Center for Environmental Science, highlighted the role of risk in decision-making and the need to shift toward empowerment for researchers to have a pipeline for sharing signals of change. There were some reinforced parts and points made by Dr. Larson and Dr. Wenger, especially the need for a shared vision and nimble governance as changes alter these risks. All the talks were recorded. Again, I highly recommend listening to them because there were so many good examples given. And then the breakout session had 5 work groups, 10 participants in each work group. And the next slide will sort of illustrate what that looked like. And this was really the main part of the meeting, was just hearing from people. There were over 100 people that participated, about 70 each day. It was hearing from the community that yielded the most broad set of ideas for addressing these grand challenges. There were some consistencies between days on quick wins and major projects worth pursuing. Day 1 had direct audience questions and answers, a Menti survey of if and how the new framework would be even more useful. And in the room and online, the discussions focused on challenging aspects of growing the science enterprise and growing scientists, thinking about the youth. Day one's focus was, again, not just on these feedback loops with hearing from the community, but we talked especially about the who and the how is information being shared. Who's at the table and how is information being shared? And I'm not sure the screen is showing this beautiful collage of, yeah, I thought maybe that was a temporary thing. So
Yeah.
sorry. Thanks. So the next slide, thank you so much. Excellent. Yeah, these are the beautiful pictures that the comms team pulled together. But you can just see this, active engagement. Again, focusing on what information is being shared, and a big question was why? Why is the information being shared? And this is a concern amongst Indigenous traditional knowledge practitioners, understanding why, and how unbiased the data that we're talking about is. These same topics came up in day two, but there were also some concrete examples of horizon scanning and shared visions. All these ideas have been collated and summarized into quadrant boxes of effort and impact. So, low and high effort, low and high impact. And between both days, there were many good suggestions for low effort, high impact, what we'll call quick wins, to happen. But there's also some major projects people think we need to start working on because we need to anticipate how important they will be to start growing out these shared visions and more collaborative interactions. And then in the end, everybody agreed that the Grand Challenges framework looks to be more inclusive and inspiring for the growing enterprise here. Next steps are to compile this feedback from the room, online, the Menti survey, the breakout groups, the murals, discussion. It's going to take a while to put together, but something forthcoming should be very powerful for the next edition of the Delta Science Plan, which should be coming out in the fall. At least a draft version will be coming out in the fall for public comment. And I want to turn it over to Dr. Wanger for her to share her perspectives because she was a featured presenter on day two. Dr. Wanger, do you have some thoughts?
Yeah, thank you, Lisamarie, and that was a really nice summary. I just want to second your point that it was a really worthwhile workshop. I think folks had great conversations in terms of thinking big, but also practically, and reaching for new ideas, but trying to figure out how it works in the system that they have. And I really enjoyed the breakout group that I was in. And I saw a lot of uptake of ideas from the talks, which I guess means our Laurel and my talks were at least marginally useful. And, I think it was great that Laurel actually raised some modeling tools that could be used to project the future. And then I focused a lot on success stories where I've seen science, adapt to change, and most importantly, understand how to apply that understanding of change to decision makers. And so that was a big theme. I think one of the interesting points was made in a question I got, which was, or actually it was a question for Laurel, sorry. It's difficult for agencies to create scenarios with unfavorable features. They get a lot of pushback. And so one of Laurel's answers to that question was that it's a reason that we need outside groups who have more flexibility to explore the science in different ways, outside the agencies, that is, and sometimes have a little more trust, not always, of the interested parties. But everyone, Laurel and I really stress this need to explore outcomes and major changes. So I think that got through. And yeah, I just think this was a nice structure for really thinking through this, giving people some thoughts initially, and then having these breakout groups where people try to think, what are some ways we can implement this? And I look forward to seeing how you adapt the plan in response to the workshop. Thanks.
So grateful for your attendance and your answering of questions, because that was the whole point, was to have interactions. Thank you again, Dr. Wanger. I think we can go to the next slide and talk about the upcoming workshop next week. So next week is also the Interagency Ecological Program workshop at the CNRA building. You had to register as of last Friday, but there is, I just want to highlight our workshop that's being hosted by the Delta Science Program specifically. That's the first of the Delta CHAB implementation plan workshops, where the focus is on the particular, the particular recommendation 1.5, which is to hold an annual meeting that actually gets people to share priority management questions amongst the agencies, current status, and try to foster a collaborative approach to implementing the Delta CHAB strategy. Again, the focus of our strategy is coordination, collaboration, and communication amongst agency and community partners. If you look at the list, it's a half-day session, and within that half-day, which is concurrent with the IEP meeting, there's a series of talks, about 10 presentations, and so it will be a nice broad swath of information across agencies. I want to call out again the co-chairs who are pulling together the session, and there's a link here to register if you haven't already. You can also find it on the IEP workshop page, registration. Okay, next slide, please. Thank you. So in 2 months, on May 9th, we'll have the 10th in a series of shared a symposium that is shared by the UC Davis Coastal and Marine Sciences Institute and the Delta Science Program. Again, we co-host this once a year, and the focus this year is on microplastics in aquatic ecosystems, with a focus on the heavily urbanized San Francisco Bay Delta and its diverse habitats. So the focus is on these, the sources, the impacts, especially land-based plastics, including things like tire particles, wastewater sources, increasingly wildfires as sources of microplastics into the system. So the focus is on not just their presence, but then also on their impacts. And you can see this confirmed speaker list broadly across agencies, academics, and even Canadians participating as well. If you want to attend in person, please register. There's also the live streamed version if you want to watch online, and it will be recorded. But registration is required, and it is an all-day event on UC Davis's campus on May 9th. All right, next slide, please. Another product coming up very soon, ideally next week, if it gets released, is the San Francisco Estuary and Watershed Sciences release of our State of the Bay Delta Science reports. This is the Extreme Events edition. And this particular edition focuses on impacts, impact of extreme events on Delta ecosystems and social systems. And the highlight that Denise Colombano really wants me to make sure we understand is that the Delta is a non-stationary system that has shifted into a novel regime with extreme events that will continue to challenge research and management as climate change intensifies. So the introduction leans on that non-stationarity, the importance of it in all of these chapters. And so that introduction is led by Jan Thompson and Cliff Daum, former lead scientist, also on the guest editorial board. The other papers in the issue coming out next week is one on governance, led by Jessica Rudnick, our former social science extension specialist. Heat waves, led by Brian Maharja and Sam Bashkevin. And the last one is one on drought by Rosemary Hartman. And all three of those will be included with the introduction in the March issue. The September issue will have the last three, and that will be one on wildfire and water quality impacts, led by Cliff Daum, and one on atmospheric rivers, led by Sasha Gershenov. And the last part of the September article is the synthesis, and this is the one Denise Colombano is overseeing, pulling together threads from all of these papers, again, with a strong focus on non-stationarity, and that should be coming out in September. Other communication products to consider are, we'll be talking about these products, we'll be incorporating them into other releases of ours in terms of council meetings, in seminar series. There will be information sheets and blogs, perhaps even videos, and possibly an Esri story map to just convey, again, the importance of this shifting template of the extremeness of the events that we're having right now in the Bay Delta. All right, next slide, please. Thank you. All right, social science integration. As you know, this has been a real push within the Delta Science program for a while, but the council overall. And so these notes here are coming to us from the planning division, and particularly Annie Merritt wanted us to highlight this new outreach material. Over the last year, the research team has developed a few outreach products that are now available online. And so we hope you'll check out these materials to explore survey results and consider sharing these materials with your networks to help get them in the hands of Delta residents, community groups, and decision makers to learn from and use the survey data. For an overview of the Delta resident survey research effort, if you are new to this, don't remember, and includes links to all of these materials, including these outreach materials. You can click here on this this website, or you can write to this email and somebody will get back to you, give you some more information. The short handouts are summarizing key results. So for example, the research team has developed 2 short handouts summarizing key survey results about rural, small town, and urban Delta residents. It's 2 separate groups. These handouts aim to highlight key results for rural, small town, and urban Delta communities respectively, and demonstrate why continual long-term monitoring of the human dimensions of the Delta will be important to understand the similarities and differences in well-being of rural and urban communities. Additionally, the Delta Stewardship Council developed a handout highlighting results on experiences with and attitudes related to climate change and other environmental hazards. All 3 of these handouts are now hosted on the Delta Stewardship Council's website, again, at that link above, and the data viewer application is available on the Delta Science Shiny Apps page if you want to see this data spatially. So again, this data might be useful to the Emerging Climate Symposium. Just want to make sure people are aware of it and begin to explore it on their own. In addition to those publicly available outreach materials, the council worked with Sacramento State's Institute of Social Research to mail postcards back to the mailing addresses of all the survey respondents to let them know that survey results are available and how to explore the results. And we hope returning the survey results to the people who participated directly into their hands helps residents see that their time was valued and their perspectives heard, and also allow them to see how their responses were similar or different to their peers. The postcard should be arriving in respondents' mailboxes very soon. Again, there's by clicking through here, you can see the summary reports, you can see an open data repository, and there's an anonymized publicly available version of the survey data in there. The research team has multiple additional data analyses in progress, and then they will be sharing all additional results and any academic journal articles with this group in the near future. All right, that's that. And let me go to the big event right now in hiring. We've been interviewing for the last 4 weeks different potential candidates for this social science extension specialist. It's been initiated with a broad search through the California Sea Grant. This position will be based at UC Davis, and all interviews were conducted there with an audience. As well as they came over here to Sacramento to the California Natural Resources Agency building to meet council staff and then also talk through their vision and ideas for implementation. The decisions there should be coming within the next couple weeks. It'll take a while. These candidates were truly excellent. From Jose Rodriguez, an economist, Tara Posey, a specialist in governance, Julia Sizek, an anthropologist, and Yu Tsao, a political scientist. And so just really tremendous ideas and background coming from these candidates. And we're so grateful that they came here to give their talks. All right, next slide, please. Thank you. Okay, there's a new paper out. You've heard about it before, I believe. It's the one led by Dr. Shoko Shinbrod. It was just accepted. It will be in the June issue of San Francisco Estuarine Watershed Science. It's on integrating traditional knowledge, and the specific title is Changing Paradigms of Knowledge Production, Interweaving Traditional Knowledge and Predominant Science in the Delta. The paper begins with a central challenge. Many Delta scientists and managers do not know what traditional knowledge is or how to begin the work of interweaving. And she goes through the paper, the whole team, to address this issue. They discuss participatory approaches to interweaving traditional knowledge, perceived similarities and differences, as well as key barriers and solutions to interweaving. And they end with 3 examples of areas ripe for interweaving in the Delta: cultural burning, restoration, ecosystem restoration, and species management specifically. So I invite you to read the upcoming paper when it comes out in June. The next part about integrating traditional knowledge was that last week was our launch of the Roundtable series. So this is going to be a series of 5 roundtables with a target audience of Delta decision makers, scientists, and tribes. And the goal is to help having the decision makers, scientists, and tribes better understand each other and start applying approaches to interweaving. On the right, there's a diagram here just to put this in perspective. This is one that Shoko used during our talks during the workshop last week to highlight how, for example, on the left, you have local knowledge, indigenous knowledge, and traditional knowledge, basically practitioners' knowledge. And then you have streams on the right of science, social science, environmental science, and so on, and how when you start letting these interweave, you get a much more enriched picture of the knowledge that's available and its applicability. So this particular roundtable, I think, has a great start with, again, the presentations by Nina Fontana and Zach Gigon. And again, I hope that some of you will participate in the roundtables as they continue this summer. And then last, thank you for that. Last slide, please. And this one is, well, it's a bittersweet report here. We are going to be seeing vacancies emerge this year as 2 of our members step down, Dr. Virginia Dale, landscape ecologist, and Dr. Robert Nyman, an aquatic ecologist with restoration expertise as well. And Tom Holzer has already stepped down, and with a geology focus, in particular physical geology. We are in the process of recruiting 3 new independent science board members to start on September 1st, 2025. And we are looking for people to make suggestions of people to send copies of this flyer to. The flyer is now available, and I've lost my screen. I was trying to open a different screen. If you look at the call, you'll see that the request, I've lost that screen, so I'm just going to go to a different screen. We're looking for 3 prominent scientists, and we will be looking for them to serve on the Independent Science Board, which provides oversight of the science underlying decision-making for California's Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta. Again, our focus on this call is desired expertise in physical hydrology, geology, ecology, and/or traditional knowledge. The candidates must meet the qualifications of the Delta Reform Act. So please take a look at that for more details. In particular, we would like the candidates to be nationally or internationally prominent. So scientists, an internationally or nationally prominent scientist with appropriate expertise to evaluate the broad range of scientific programs that support adaptive management of the Delta. And we're looking for the candidates also to not be directly affiliated with a program or agency subject to the reviews of the Delta Independent Science Board. An application including a letter of interest and a curriculum vitae and a list of 5 references should be sent to our dedicated email before March 31st. And we're looking forward to having a nice wide swath of applicants to take a look at. And we're really very grateful and humbled by the experience that we've had being able to work with Tom, Virginia, and Bob on these really conflicting, really difficult challenges in bringing science to bear on decision-making in this conflict-laden system. And I can take questions now, or I can just move to the next slide and say thank you. And open it up to any questions from the board or the public. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Lisamarie. That was an impressive array of activities and events. I just want to add that I was able to see some of the talks last week at the Delta Science Workshop, and they were really wonderful talks, and I wish I could have been there for the entire workshops. Thank you. Questions and comments from the board, please raise your hand. Nobody. So I think everybody is impressed. Okay.
Yeah, I'll ask Lisamarie. Thank you. Very nice array. I agree. I do have a question of the state of Bay Delta science. I think it's a series of papers coming out in March, if I understood correctly. And do you think there is some overlap between what's covered there versus our science symposium, climate science symposium?
Yeah, thank you, Obe. I sat in on at least, I think 2 of your listening sessions, and I do think that there's overlap, in particular with suggestions, the ones coming out right now on governance, drought, and heat waves. There are suggestions for agencies to respond, how they can better respond and anticipate changes. I think for that audience, that might be your symposium might be a good place to highlight some of those suggestions. Again, they're just suggestions, not decision points or action. So
yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks. I'll make sure you have copies of these.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Lisa, you had a.
I did have my hand up. I took it down, but I will, it's very quick. Lisa, I just want to know how we can best help you on the search for the new folks. So there's about a month, it seems, since when it'll get advertised and when the deadline is. So it sounds like we need to kind of get on it if we're going to help you recruit.
Yes, please. So the listserv should go out tomorrow. It is actually live right now. I will be forwarding copies of the live website to some people that I've been thinking about, as potential vacancy fillers. But I believe that you can do the same, and that would be much appreciated, because I think your networks are obviously broader. As a whole, your networks are much broader than any single person or, our specific focus here in the Delta. So that would be great. Thank you for actually bringing that up, Dr. Major. I wanted to highlight that, that I want you all to share that request through your networks.
All right. Virginia.
So I was going to say, that's a nice poster you have. If you could send that to us, that would be really helpful. That's a good thing to distribute about the hiring. And well, first off, you've done an amazing job. You've been really busy. I'm impressed. I really like the figure you showed with about extreme events, what I call a conceptual diagram. If we could get a copy of that too, that would be really helpful. I'm not sure what the original source of that was.
Oh, thank you, Virginia. Yeah, that is I think we put it in the introduction. It's definitely in the synthesis, which is coming out in September, but I think we may have submitted it as a figure if it was allowed in the introduction. I think the question is whether they'll publish it or not, but it's beautiful, and I will actually make sure that you get a copy. ISB gets a copy of that for sure.
Yeah, okay, thank you so much, and good job.
Bob?
I guess I'm going to end up just echoing what Virginia just said. I thought that was a very nice presentation. So my only question to you, Lisamarie, is how do you find the energy to keep track of all those activities and report them out so nicely? It's impressive how well you do that. So anyway, way to go. Much appreciated.
You're awfully nice, Bob, but you know there's a huge, amazing staff here. It's one of the reasons I need to highlight them and their accomplishments because, yeah, this ship doesn't sail without that crew. It's a really incredible group.
All right. Well, are there any public comments, Edmund?
Yes, we have one from Deirdre Desjardins. Deirdre, you should have the ability to unmute your microphone. Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to call people's attention. I think it's very relevant to some research on a research paper. It's called Historical Language Records Reveal a Surge of Cognitive Distortions in Recent Decades. It's led by Johan Bolin at Indiana University. And there's a group of complex systems researchers and cognitive psychologists. And they looked for patterns of words in language texts that were associated with cognitive distortions, including denial, that are associated with anxiety and depression. And there was been a global surge starting around 1980 and really striking. The study was published in 2021, but I've been seeing there's a lot of I think it likely accelerated during the pandemic and also with climate change. And, you know, there was a huge acceleration in climate change impacts in like 21, 22, and 23. So I wanted to get that to you, and I also wanted to call it to your attention because I think maybe being aware of it as you do the social science work might be really helpful. So I'll send that to you, Lisamarie, and to the Delta Independent Science Board. But it's really quite striking. And they also did a analysis of using the same, they used Google digitized you know, like an enormous number of texts, including books and English, German, Spanish, and they did searches, you know, global searches of this database. Another one, they looked and they found that there was an increase in emotional language associated with emotional reasoning, and a decrease in language associated with, you know, rational and cognitive processing over starting around 1980, and a similar thing. And there have been a global rise since 1850 in language associated with rationality. So it's really fascinating. It looks like it started around the time of mass media and accelerated with social media, but it indicates that there may be some kind of fundamental shift in the fabric of our society. So I think it's very much associated with social systems.
Yeah, I'm very grateful. Thank you for the highlight. Dr. Shoko Shinbrough was on the call and she could have taken questions at some point, but I think she's dropped off. But I'll make sure that one makes its way to the social science integration team. Thanks.
Yeah, I'll get you both of them. And it just suddenly it was like, I think actually just as the Enlightenment and the invention of the printing press you know, changed the fabric of our society and allowed the dissemination of scientific treatises and other learned works. I think that social media has been changing the fabric of our society again, and amplifying certain forms of communication, and it's being driven through, I want to use the word, I use the word tribal networks, but I mean really in-group networks of people with, like, people who associate because they share common beliefs and identity. So it's pretty stunning.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks very much, everybody. With no other comments, I would then move on to agenda item 6, which is a discussion of the contaminant monitoring review prospectus. I'm hoping you all had a chance to review it before the meeting. So just to give the background, we are planning to conduct a review on contaminant monitoring in the Delta. Review leads have prepared a draft prospectus for discussion today, and we would like to discuss this perspective and determine if it's ready to go out for a 30-day public comment period after comments are addressed. So I'm going to give a brief overview for those who haven't been able to read it at this point. This is more or less based on 2 fairly recent Delta ISB reviews that looked at water quality science, focused on chemical contaminants and overall monitoring exercises in the Delta. The first one was published in 2018 and the other in 2022. I actually prepared a summary, so thank you, Edmund, for going over. I wasn't going to use the actual prospectus to talk about, but that's okay, just to summarize. So some of the main conclusions of those reviews were that the current programs were insufficiently comprehensive and that it was unclear how contaminant data entered into management decision-making. More holistic studies and consideration of contaminant mixture effects and multiple stressors were recommended to better link monitoring to ecosystem processes. So the review, as intended, which is intended to proceed now, is meant to be more specific. We would like to understand the regulation driving contaminant monitoring in the Delta, take a close look at what is currently being monitored and how contaminant risks to aquatic species and ecosystems is communicated to managers in particular. In addition, we would like to explore the opportunities for using more advanced methods to predict toxicity and to measure the effects of contaminants and how they could be integrated into existing monitoring programs. So the overall very general goals of this review are current contaminant monitoring is able to provide a comprehensive picture of the ecological risk of contaminants in the Delta? How is the monitoring data used in designing and taking management actions? And what are the gaps and what can be done to fill them? Now, we have divided the approach up into 3 phases. Phase 1 would be a series of interviews with experts in this field who have designed and have been involved in designing and conducting the monitoring in the Delta. Phase 2 would consist of reviewing and evaluating these programs that exist using available scientific information and identifying critical gaps. And phase 3 would be focused more on getting to environmental realism, at least for contaminant mixtures, by educating ourselves and others on more advanced tools in effect-based methods, effect-based, basically toxicity measurement methods, toxicity methods, and risk assessment. I mean, there have been a lot of advances. People are continuously working on making that better, and how these more advanced tools could be integrated to increase our understanding of contaminant risk in the Delta. Now, we fully recognize that monitoring contaminants in a large system like the Delta is extremely challenging. It's extremely challenging in smaller systems due to just the multitude of chemical contaminants that enter our environment. And especially so when resources are limited, which is also common. We also recognize that there are many knowledgeable and experienced experts in the region who are or have been involved in developing and running existing programs. So there have been reports that are listed in this prospectus as well that just recently came out in 22 and 23 of how to prioritize contaminants of emerging concern for monitoring, and has been a risk assessment done on existing data, also with the goal of saying, okay, these are the contaminants we have to be most concerned about, etc. So we will, of course, study all of these and include those in the review. So that's very briefly the content, and I want to thank Bob and Kenny and Tanya for their important input, and Margot Mattson, of course, for her support on coming up with this prospectus. So please shoot with questions and comments, and we will take them all in and see if hopefully we can vote on whether or not to proceed with this today, but if not, we'll wait for another turn. Lisa.
Well, thanks for this great prospectus. I see this being so valuable to understand these interactions and really understanding which are the chemicals of concern. And on it, my comment is really in the presentation of the motivation for the work. So you take a little while to sort of get around to how this information will help us. And I think the prospectus could benefit from just a clearer statement in the beginning of what the goals of understanding chemicals, contaminants better are. You know, we want to protect aquatic habitat. We need to prioritize, allocate scarce resources among all these many contaminants that folks are worried about. You know, just, I think it would just be nice. You do get to that eventually, but I think it would be nice to have it just a little more highlighted in the beginning, in that first section.
Yeah.
Because I just kept wondering, like, so, you know, what occurred to me as I was reading it, remember I'm an economist, was scientists always want more data. What is the real why here, you know, so.
Okay, yeah, that's a good comment, thank you. Obi, I think, was first.
Yeah, again, I read it a couple of times, and again, I'm not an expert on this. You know, this is my kind of a comments, you know, on the surface, trying to understand what's being done. You know, to me, you know, there is a spatial temporal aspect of this, spatial aspect in a large system like this. So it's not clear to me, are we simply reviewing what is there? And I really don't understand the phase 3 of it. What is being what are we targeting in phase 3 solutions? And also, are we looking for like an optimal network of monitoring, or just understanding what has been done and what needs to be done?
Ah, you're digging the finger right into it, Obi. Well, I don't think we want to, we will be able to come up with a template for a monitoring program for the Delta and say, this is what you have to do. I mean, there are many other people who have thought about this quite intensively, I'm quite sure, you know, but what and maybe the result will be what's being done is perfect. You know, there's not, with the available resources, they are not able to do more. I think we would like to take a look at especially the recent reports on prioritization of contaminants of emerging concern. You know, how is this being integrated? Has it been integrated? Is the analyte list outdated, for example, or are there critical gaps we know about based on information that's out there? You know, that kind of thing. I don't think we can get to all the questions that exist in ecotoxicology and all the black boxes that exist in ecotoxicology. But monitoring programs, and I'm not sure if it's true for this one because it's not that old, tend to get stuck in their ruts. So people try to, you know, monitor the same things over and over again, and things change in the field, for example. Or, as I said, phase 3 we would like to look at some more advanced tools that have not, I know, have not been used in the Delta. And I think I know why, but, you know, the seminar series is supposed to be there to make people aware that these tools exist. And we would like to look at, is it feasible to introduce or use some of these tools in the Delta to get more, to make monitoring programs more, the term is ecologically relevant, and move away from the, okay, this particular chemical is a problem and we have to regulate that, because it's not what is the reality in the field. In the reality in the field are mixtures, you know, are multiple stressors. It's what impacts the ecosystem. And so the field has evolved of ecotoxicology, but in many cases, the monitoring programs have not. And so just taking a look at that, I think, could be very beneficial.
Yeah, like I think like Lisa said, if you kind of clarify what we are doing and maybe not doing up front might be helpful to the reader, perhaps. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if you have concrete suggestions of what would help you understand, we have a paragraph in there that says what we're not doing.
Right. I think
Because
is that
this topic came up before, so.
Right. Is that the expected products and outcome of the review paragraph?
No, I don't have it right here, but
Okay. Says scope of the review. Okay. That's fine.
scope, it's in the scope of the review.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll read it again. Obviously, I don't have the expertise to provide any specific language on this one, but
No, but it's important that you
Yeah.
can figure
Yeah.
out, you know, what we're trying to do as well. So
Yeah, from an engineer, as an engineer, I look at the wording of phase 3. It says research chemical mixtures. What does that mean in this context? You know, layperson reading this. You know,
yeah. See, I
I
don't
was
know
curious.
that.
Yeah, right. I mean, that's kind of an example of.
Yeah.
And
That
if I
would
could
have
just
helped.
add on to this comment, I see Virginia's waiting, but it's directly relevant that what you just said, Inga, that you just articulated, it didn't come across well in the prospectus and was very clarifying. So you can go back and listen to the recording if you don't remember what you just said,
okay.
but
I might
I
have
would
to.
I would try to insert some of that language.
Okay, thank you. Virginia,
Yeah, I also agree with your discussion just now has been helpful, and I like Lisa's suggestion to put the goal up front. To me, what is really valuable about this effort is linking the monitoring to management decisions. So I've sent you, or sent through Edmund, some suggested wording that might be helpful. So you'll get that. But the one thing I know about the challenge of contaminants is knowing what to sample for, because if you don't look for it, it's not there.
right?
So in the beginning, you talk about that there's not enough information to identify sources, fates, and effects, but sources is the real challenge. So I'm wondering if, an effort to look for where chemical companies are or ways, chemicals are used to treat waste or anything like that. But having some kind of survey of sources, I think would be critical. So you know what to monitor for. And maybe that's already known, but I'm not aware of that.
Yeah, I mean, to a certain extent, we do, right? So runoff, of course, from ag fields or urban areas, or then wastewater treatment plants, for example, are clear sources. Where it becomes a lot more difficult are industrial plants, for example.
Right.
And I'm not even sure at this point how much information they share on what they're emitting, with the boards, with the water boards. So, I mean, that we still have to find out. They do all need permits to release their effluents into the system, and those should be public, I hope. And there are a list of contaminants they have to monitor. So, and they can be adapted, which is also what we found out in the scoping of this, more easily actually than monitoring programs that are going on for years and years. So that is my current understanding, but it is a daunting task to look at individual chemicals. However, from other countries, from other systems, we also know quite a lot about it. And so to the extent possible, I would like to take a look at those contaminant lists contaminants that are being measured, and see if the usual suspects and the chemicals we know are toxic are covered, or if lists may still be monitoring things that have been banned a long time ago, that kind of thing. So does this answer your question?
Yeah, this sounds good. I didn't see that in there, but I think looking at permits is really an important way to do that. And if they're not publicly available, you can certainly ask for them through a FOIA, because they should be accessible.
I think they should be, and we'd be talking to the respective people at the water boards about that as well. Yeah. And that's why I say, I mean, there are people here that know a lot about the system, and also the people who designed the monitoring programs that are currently being performed, they very knowledgeable. We want to hear from them as well, and see which direction that takes us. So
yeah, but the challenge is looking for what is not being looked at. I mean, now everybody's concerned about microplastics, but we weren't looking for those for a long time. So we need.
You're absolutely right, and there will be a lot of black boxes there, because we either don't know, or we don't know what they degrade into. We don't have any toxicity information on them, etc. There are plenty of those. So yes.
Well, it's important So it's going to be a step in the process. I guess I'll put it that way.
Yes, there will be a paragraph saying this and this and this is unknown, and we do not know how that affects the system. Yeah, definitely be that.
Okay, thank you.
Kenny.
Yeah, so I have a very different perspective on it. This has been done before. There's massive lists of chemicals that we don't know much about. That's really not that hard to do. The harder part is when you go from there to which one should we worry about. That to me is the challenge. Of course, I work in that area, so you know it's going to be mine. But I remember, let's see, I've been out there 25 years. At least twice I've seen massive lists of chemicals, and all of them, you pretty much, except for several dozen, we say we don't know anything about them. So I don't think we want to do that again.
Mm-hmm.
I think what we want to do, and maybe not, but is help them figure out which ones are not only present, but which ones are a problem. And to do that, you have to take that into the ecology arena or physiology arena, to be able to then say, yeah, we don't know a lot about a lot of them, or however that goes. But really, there are these classes, these families, these areas geographic areas where there's very high sensitivity. And then that helps you design your monitoring program. But and it may, for me, I don't think we want to do another grandiose list of things that when I read it, they all sound alike. And when you go down the list. So I have a different view of it. I think we, as a group, we should decide we can't do it all. Which do we want to do? Attack the sources? What are they missing? Or attack, what do you do now when you have all this data that you collected and no one really knows how to prioritize it? So I think that's a strategic decision for us to make.
Well, and luckily others have tackled this issue. That 2023 report or 22, I can't remember, that's listed in there, looks at risk. They actually collected all the data. Maybe, I don't think it was Delta specific. They collected all the data that's out there. They did a risk assessment as far as they could in terms of, what they had for toxicity information and threshold information.
Right.
All in the name of trying to prioritize what should be monitored and what shouldn't. You don't want to monitor something that's not really a risk for anything. So I think a lot of that has already been done.
If it's been done, it's not being applied in the Delta.
And that's the question. I would like to see, has it been applied? Has that knowledge been integrated into the monitoring program?
Right.
So, no, I mean, I don't want to go through chemical by chemical, collect all the information, et cetera, et cetera. That's way too much work. I think that's why I'm saying, based on existing information, what others have done, I want to look outside the Delta. I want to look at what other people have done, what other countries have done. I mean, the chemicals we use are pretty international, and they are, a lot of them are used widely and around the world. So,
right.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah. Bob.
I want to agree very strongly with what Kenny had to say, as well as Virginia's comment about sources. And just to put my support behind those comments. But I find as far as this particular activity goes, it's the third part which I find to be the most exciting and potentially the most useful. And that's looking at emerging tools. And I really think we need to focus strongly on basically the frontiers of science, of toxicity science. You know, whether it's how do you use AI as a tool to help you predict, you know, what toxicities might be or interactions in the environment might be. You know, there's other areas are like the work that's been done over the last couple of decades on looking at the molecular structure of particular chemicals and using those molecular structures and configurations to look at how they react in the environment. Using emerging modeling to try and synthesize vast amounts of information about a great diversity of chemicals, both traditional ones as well as emerging ones that are now being put into the environment, you know, to help predict. We're a science board, and I really think we should be focusing a lot more of our efforts on the frontiers of where how science can contribute to a collective understanding of chemicals in the environment and how that can be used in management. So that's why I guess I feel very strongly about what Kenny had to say. We don't need more lists. What we need are better insights and new ways of approaching the contaminant issues, that are facing us and are going to be facing us for a long time to come. Sorry, I lost my voice there. Anyway, my comments. I'll stop there. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely very dear to my heart, I have to say. When I talk to the managers, though, they look at me in an exasperated kind of way and go, yeah, but that's not how regulation works. So that's why I think that's a really important aspect of this exercise, to look at what are the drivers, what does the regulation require, and so on. So it might be a stopper for that. And then it becomes more of an educational exercise in what tools are out there and what could be useful, right? So, but then if we want to look at this important connection between data production and synthesis and management actions and communicating it to managers, I mean, that's how they are thinking. They're thinking in terms of regulations. So I think that'll be an important part of this review as well, to see where are the stoppers in this whole process. And is there, I'm not getting into can that be changed or can anything be done? But I think we can point out those obstacles that are there, right?
I think you can point them out, but I've been pondering this for a long time, with our collective activities is, we're supposed to be an independent science board with the emphasis on science. And it seems with the toxicity or the contaminant proposal, perhaps we're facing a dichotomy here. I agree that regulations and that side of the equation are really important. And maybe this is where Tanya can step in is how do we apply science to that, as opposed to looking at what I would, as my viewpoint is, looking more at the science side about the frontiers of science that can help us look at this, god-awful massive mixture of all these chemicals in the environment and help us better understand how they're going to react, at the physiological level with organisms and ecological processes. And I know we can't do both in this symposium or workshop, but we perhaps may need to make a decision as to where our emphasis goes in our specific activities that we engage in over the next few months. And it's just a massive undertaking. And I don't mind if the group wants to go towards regulations and applications to management, great, that's fine with me. But I'm going to fall on the side of kind of where are the frontiers and avenues in the science realm that are going to help us better understand, what we can do with this massive problem. So, well, you've got other folks there waiting to.
Okay. Tanya has her hand raised. Do you want to talk to this first, Tanya, or Lisa has her hand raised?
No, go to Tanya first, because I've spoken before and Tanya.
Well, yeah, and Bob raised a question that wasn't in my head when I initially raised my hand. So, well, let me say a couple things, and I'll address Bob's comment there. I do think, one of the things we could do to just tighten up the current proposal to address Kenny's question, and also perhaps the first couple questions that maybe came from Lisa and Virginia around, how we bring that focus more to the beginning, is we talk a lot in the background section of the draft around the emphasis on risk assessment, ecological risk assessment. And I think that the focus that Kenny was kind of pushing is there in that section, but it might be missing a little bit from the beginning. And I think just some wordsmithing could probably address that concern. So, but I do think we want to be clear that is more of the emphasis, that we aren't doing this kind of, well, let's just take an inventory of all the potential contaminants out there and, see everything possible, because that would not be a wise use of our time. On I guess, kind of on that question that Bob raised, though, on the extent to which we tackle the kind of regulatory environment, I think when we look at the first bullet point under our main questions, are the current contaminant monitoring programs able to provide a comprehensive picture of the ecological risks of contaminants in the Delta? I think we have to know something about the regulatory environment in order to answer that question. But I think we can also do, to some degree, Bob, what you were suggesting, in that we also need to be able to say something about what is the state of the art of the science on the risk assessment, what is the state of the art on the tools for conducting that science, and then where we know there might be gaps between the state of the art and what is currently being monitored, we can speak to that interface. But I think we do have to know something about that regulatory system in order to say where those tools can better be integrated or not. So, or where they already are. So, yeah, I think there's ways to thread the needles of the conversation that we've been having. And that the structure we have in this current draft, I think, gives us that with maybe some tweaking. So, thanks.
Thank you, Tanya. Lisa.
Yeah, thanks. These have been really good comments, and I just want to add a little bit to it. First, I do like the idea that you've been emphasizing too about focusing on the new tools, and I wouldn't be afraid to be a little unreasonable in our recommendations, because that's the only way a system changes, is to put out there, some maybe reasonably unreasonable suggestions, like you can't get there immediately, but maybe this is a long-term goal. Especially if we have a good, compelling reason that this one chemical at a time thing that's required under regs is not doing the job, and therefore we need to think about multi-stressors, whatever it is. Okay, so that's one thing. And then I think it would be nice if you could, sorry, I have a lot of noise here. Tell me if you're not hearing me okay. This just something a little bit more about or explain in the prospectus a little more clearly if you're going to look at ways that things get prioritized, because I think that's a question I have now at the end of this conversation is obviously resources are always scarce. So it's almost not the regs to me that are most important thing, it's the scarce resources. And maybe you know, those quadrant diagrams that the Delta Science program likes to use, where it's effort on the x-axis and impact on the y-axis, you know, it even just thinking about that, because I think that's what the new tools do for you, is maybe some of this stuff sounded unreasonable on the old tools, but with the new tools, now the effort is much lower, but we see a high impact. So maybe trying to find that space where you're getting the lower effort, higher impact approaches, you know, could be one criterion, but maybe you also want to think about other criterion.
Yeah,
through the
that's a really
ecological
great
risk.
idea, Lisa. That's a great idea. I like those too. Yeah. I also want to add that to Kenny's comment too, that I'm one of those nerds that actually likes to take a look at those lists of chemicals and see what they tell me. But it's probably just because I'm sort of used to at least a selection of them. So anyway, but yeah, I think that's been done already. Obi.
Yeah, I'll make it quick. I mean, the discussion helped me to better say what I was going to say in the beginning. So, you know, I look at this as we want to know the ecological risk of this myriad of contaminants that are coming. And what I'm understanding that we really don't know the ecological risk of all of them. So it seems like we want to kind of prioritize what are the contaminants of concern to Bay Delta. A bad player somewhere else might not be a bad player in the in this large system, except for some specific locations. It seems like we need to know what do we know, and then see are there any gaps in monitoring. And I'm all for phase 3. Now I understand what it means, the tools. I think it's a good idea what Bob said. That's all what I needed to say. We need to, instead of looking at this full list of things, we want to know what are the contaminants of concern for this system and see if there are gaps, right? I mean, that's all what I wanted to see in this perspective.
Yeah. I think I can assure you that people have been asking that exact question for decades. So, and with some success, of course. Yeah. All right. Any more suggestions? Those are really valuable comments. Thank you. And I'm counting on Tanya to help with the wordsmithing that she was talking about. That and of course another critical look maybe by Kenny and Bob to eliminate what they cannot stand behind, or at least suggest different wording. Do we have any public comments, Edmund, on this?
Yes, we have 2 public comments, and we'll go in the order that I call your name. First will be Deirdre Desjardins, then will be Sarah Palmer. And if this is the first time where you're providing comments to the board, feel free to briefly introduce yourself, but this is strictly optional. So Deirdre, you have the ability to unmute your microphone. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate your planning this. And I know the board likes to stay non-political, but we are having a major change, huge step change in how the Environmental Protection Agency works. And it's good to Project 2025 saying that EPA structure and mission should be greatly circumscribed to reflect the principles of cooperative federalism and limited governance. There are planned and they propose significant restructuring and streamlining of the agency. Part of it involves relying more on state agencies. And I think it might be good. I think it's a huge, there's also a lot of cuts. So 1,000 EPA employees were given notices that they were on probationary status and might be terminated. And I think about 400 have been terminated. And there's also concerns, some like the CDC, some agencies have had data sets taken offline. So it's actually a really important conversation about how to sort of preserve data sets, and the structure of monitoring is likely to change, as well as enforcement. And I think it might be good to think if there's a way to, thoughtfully include that, because obviously it's going to have an enormous impact on contaminant monitoring. And we, it's not clear what the changes are, but some anticipatory efforts might be helpful. And obviously, it's up to the board if they want to consider this or not, but we're in a time of major transition in how agency science and in fact the entire, funding for science in the United States is being done. And I'm hoping that the negative impacts won't be as catastrophic as they might be.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deidre. Just a quick response to that. I don't think the monitoring in the Delta for contaminants will be affected by this, because it's all paid for by California entities. So, but your point is well taken, of course. Thank you.
All
Edmund,
right, the next one will be Sarah Palmer. Sarah, you should have the ability to unmute your microphone. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. I was listening to what Deirdre was saying, and I agree with her that with the federal situation as it is right now, we really do have to concentrate a bit on what California can do. It's kind of a self-protective means at this point. Prioritization is also crucially important, as was brought up previously, and I think part of this is because so much of what goes into regulations comes from the legislators. And as it comes from legislators, it doesn't necessarily reflect the scientific facts. I'm a PhD biochemist, so I kind of get that a bit, but it doesn't reflect the scientific facts and also even what's possible. And part of what's supposed to go through is also what is feasible in terms of scientific ability or technical ability, and also what's affordable. And so I think we need to prioritize in a sense of make sure that the things that are important are the things that are up front and center to our legislators, because otherwise they do get distracted. That's it.
Thank you, Sarah. Yes. Yes. All I can say. Yes, you're right. All right. No further comments, Edmund?
There are none.
Yeah, in that case, I'm going to ask the question if the members feel ready to vote on this. Nod your head if you do. Yeah, I see some nods. Okay, great. So can we get a motion to approve the prospectus for distribution for public comments after comments from today are addressed?
I move, if I'm allowed, as past chair. I think I am. So moved.
I think you are. Thank you, Lisa. Second? Anybody second?
Second.
I'll second.
Thanks, Bob.
So,
Okay, well then we
Can I
do.
ask a question? So
Sure.
this then involve, even if it's not the whole board, certain members taking a look at it again?
Yeah.
Because some of the comments seem pretty significant to me.
Uh-huh.
And so I think I could vote no, I guess, but then that's,
You could vote no, and then you have to
then I have
deliver.
to do it, right? So,
Yes, yes.
but I'm just thinking that, you know, philosophically, we should go forward, but I hope we can have some of the people who had those major comments take a quick look at it again as part of our process. So
I thought that's what I asked for earlier, didn't I? So Tanya, Bob, and you.
it wasn't in the motion. So
No, it wasn't in the motion,
Well,
but
I guess one question is, maybe for you, Kenny, what I heard in the conversation was there were comments really about the emphasis, different, like we hit many of, I think the key points here, but it's kind of where we put the emphasis in the front end of the report that seemed to be missing, but it was there. If there's something substantively missing and it's not what we emphasize and where we kind of put it in the ordering of the reports, then that might be a different question. So are you thinking that there's something substantively missing, or is it more how we emphasize what's in there?
So I'll give an example. Bob's comments about being us emphasizing the science informing management rather than spending maybe too much time on regulatory aspects, to me was pretty important. And I don't think that's addressed in there right now. Like to what degree will we do that? So maybe that's minor or just wordsmithing, but I don't know. I've been involved with helping Inga and stuff go through it. And that didn't come out to me, that where is the line where we're going to not get involved with the regulatory aspects, but maybe that's just a couple of sentences, you know.
And I think if you look at the questions we're asking, and there's nothing in the main research questions that suggest that we're emphasizing the regulatory piece. I mean,
yeah, okay. All right.
Are current contaminant monitoring programs able to provide a comprehensive picture of ecological risks? How is the resulting data used in designing and taking management actions, and what are the gaps and what can be done to fill them?
Yeah.
And you know, where we put some of the weight.
Maybe we would do it anyway. We would ask people to comment on it as just part of our process. So
yeah.
Okay, that's okay.
There is another set of bullet points that people might be thinking about that does focus on the regulation. So maybe I think it might be a matter of taking some things out.
Okay.
One other comment on that. I think without understanding the regulation, we cannot possibly get at the question of how can this be useful to management. I mean,
right.
It has to be in there, you know, we have to understand what is driving the monitoring and what regulators can then do with it, with the data. You know, I mean, we can't really, we want it to be useful. So we have to consider we have to understand their perspective also. But what I heard today was that bringing in and educating about the new tools out there and how they can be useful needs more emphasis maybe than there is right now, and advancing, you know, monitoring with the help of information. But that's all there. So, I mean, I think we can just put more emphasis on maybe than there is right now, and making even clearer that we are not going to generate big lists of chemicals, even though I can't wait to put my hands on some of those lists. So
yeah, I think I just wanted to bring it up, and I think if we're aware of it, that's sufficient.
I think, and the motion says after comments from today are addressed. So you're not, you know, so we have to still address this,
yeah,
what was brought up here. So are you okay? Okay.
I'm okay.
Okay. Well, let's do the vote then. Virginia,
Inga, Bob had his hand up if you want to.
Oh, Bob, sorry, I didn't see it. Bob?
It probably isn't important, but I was just thinking that if the writing team would be yourself and largely Tanya, putting a revision together, Kenny and I would take a quick look at it afterwards. And the only thing I was wondering about is if there's any small issues we need to work out, is it possible to have like a quick Zoom meeting to iron out any last minute issues before it goes live to the public? I think it should be okay, but if we can have a quick face-to-face, if there's any remaining small issues.
Yeah, staff can coordinate that, I'm sure. Yeah, okay. All right. Okay, voting. Virginia,
Yes, I approve.
thank you. Tanya,
Yes.
Anna,
Yes.
Diane did not rejoin us, I think. Bob,
Yes.
Obi,
Yeah, I approve the motion. That's it.
still have to vote. Kenny,
Yes, I vote yes.
Yes.
Lisa,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well. Thank you very much. So motion has passed. So we'll adapt according to today's discussion. And then we will still have a 1-month public comment period on this, after which we have to integrate, or we will integrate those comments in the prospectus. All right, so next on the agenda is public comments for matters that are not on the agenda. Edmund, are there any?
There are none.
And then agenda item 8 is just going over upcoming meetings. So we will have an in-person meeting on March 19th and 20th. There will be a field tour. And day 2 will be the meeting. We'll get another Delta Lead Scientist report and Council Chair and Executive Officer report. Etc. Status update, the usual. We do have a presentation confirmed on what we requested as a follow-up for the presentation on the golden mussel invasion. So we will have a presentation on ballast water regulation, which should be really interesting. And then in May, as we said earlier, we will have another in-person meeting. I'm skipping April right now. And hopefully with the climate symposium on the same dates. So there's still a lot to be done. Are there any more public comments, Edmund?
There are none.
All right, so could you give us a review of what we have to do in the next few weeks?
So for the climate symposium, as soon as it's ready, we'll send out the AI generated briefing paper through Notebook LM. So keep a lookout on your inbox for that, and potentially that will be a discussion item for March. In addition, for the Delta Lead Scientist report today, there were a few asks for Lisamarie. One of them was to make sure that the board has a copy of the conceptual diagram of the extreme event State of Bay Delta Science. So make sure that gets distributed to the board, since that might be a potential item for the climate symposium, in addition to getting like the author list for the extreme events State of Bay Delta Science to help look for coordination and synergies between State of Bay Delta Science extreme events and the climate symposium. In addition, Lisamarie mentioned that the recruitment flyer is out for the Delta ISB, the 3 current or upcoming vacancies. A listserv should be going out sometime in the next day or so. As soon as that is out. Lisamarie hopes that the board members could help advertise to your networks or let her know directly on who to contact or invite. And then lastly, the board took action today. There was a motion to approve the draft prospectus after the comments from today are addressed. So prior to this meeting, we set a deadline for any written comments by tomorrow. Once we have that, the review leads will address the comments from today along with any written comments. So that's all I have for follow-up items, unless there's anything to add.
Thank you, Edmund. And do we have any more public comments?
There are none.
Right. In that case, I thank you all for the great discussions and your participation today. And I really look forward to seeing everyone in person next month. So thanks a lot. So I close, sorry, what do I say? Close the meeting for today. Adjourn the meeting, sorry. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.